get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello, Beyond Your Wildest Dreams tribe. I'm Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and on behalf of my partners, Dr. Michael Akinfora and Dr. Wanda Lee McPhee, we want to thank you all for subscribing. As we surge to 100,000 subscribers, we would like to show you our appreciation with 3 free gifts. In our show notes on iTunes and Podomatic, there are 3 separate links to each of our most latest ebooks: Fermentation 101, Paleo Crockpot Style, and Whole Foods Harvest. Thank you again, and before you begin listening to this incredible podcast, don't forget to register for our upcoming summit, the Longevity and Anti-Aging Project, Living Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, at www.antiagingproject.com. Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is Gregory Pye. Greg Pye is the Managing Director and Senior Partner of Paradigm Asset Management Company, a leading investment management advisory firm. For over 18 years, Mr. Pye has been responsible for overseeing a wide range of investments, strategic and operational functions at the firm, where he shared responsibility for attracting nearly $5 billion in discretionary assets. As a senior member of the firm's investment team, Mr. Pye is an integral part of the leadership overseeing all research, portfolio management, and product development initiatives. Prior to joining Paradigm, Mr. Pye accumulated over 10 years of experience occupying key senior positions in the entertainment industry, with responsibilities ranging from venture capital mergers and acquisitions, business development, and strategic initiatives. His last 2 industry posts were as Executive Vice President of Spear Communications, where he reported directly to Roy Spear, co-founder of the Home Shopping Network, at Spear, and previously as the strategic consultant at International Family Entertainment. It was at these 2 established media institutions where Mr. Pye was responsible for the business planning, launch, and in some cases the leadership as president and CEO of such cutting-edge cable network startups as MOR Music TV and the Game Show Channel. Mr. Pye's foray into media started with a management role in superstar Eddie Murphy's organization, where he was business manager with Murphy Lynch Productions and responsible for Mr. Murphy's live performance and ancillary activities. Landmark achievements included producing and co-promoting the world-acclaimed 1987 sold-out Raw concert tour, landing one of the most valuable sponsorship deals in history with Hakuhodo of Japan, and the management of breakthrough rap artist K9 Posse on Arista Records. Mr. Pye's earliest professional experience was as senior management consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers in New York, where he developed his skills in both small business consulting and financial services. His area of expertise focused on the strategic, operational, and financial development of emerging companies, with annual revenues between $5 million and $50 million. In addition, Mr. Pye held a senior-level post in PW's Financial Service Special Practices Unit, where he oversaw projects integrating PC-based technology at custodial bank clients such as Street Bank and mutual fund managers. Mr. Pye is a husband and father to 4 children. He has a particular love for music and photography. He is also passionate about the time he and his family spend volunteering and serving in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Gregory, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. After all that financial stuff we just mentioned, we're here ultimately to talk about photography. How are you today, my friend?
Well, no, I was listening to that, and I was, for a second, I had an out-of-body experience. I was impressed with whoever that was you were talking about. I would tell you, I thank you, first of all, for the introduction, the opportunity to speak here today. It is quite a background. I didn't do it in a couple of years. I'm getting up there in my age, mid-50s these days. But it also sounds as miraculous and wonderful and blessed as it is and sounds. I frankly have had my ups and downs. In fact, what you even described, I oftentimes talk to people, say at a cocktail party, if they ask me what I do, and I tell them I start at the top and work my way down. It's unusual that someone would have so many different interests and have so much success, and I say success with a small s, in so many varied sectors of the economy, as well as you alluded to my passion for photography and music is another tremendous passion. I mean, I've been very fortunate. But one of the things I finally realized after 55 years of life was that there was a bigger story in the works, and one that needed to be and would be told at the right time. Because quite honestly, the amidst all of those kind of trappings of success, I was confused, depressed, challenged, oftentimes incredibly unsatisfied, and didn't know even where to go with it or what to do with it. I would say that it all starts, and I call it my cradle to grave story, because I really had to die to much of what you just described to become alive again to a different life entirely, which I think is what I want to share with your audience and inspire with your audience. I was born in the Bronx, single parent, raised me, my mother, and till I was about 9. She was a switchboard operator. We lived with my grandparents in a 2-bedroom apartment, oftentimes with my aunt and her children as well, so it was awfully crowded. And, we didn't know much. I mean, I guess today you would call it the ghetto, but we didn't know because it was all we knew, and it was our life. But my mother ended up marrying a doctor at a hospital she was working at. And at that point, my life changed. We moved to New Jersey, and he afforded me a tremendous amount of opportunities. While I was in the Bronx, I was able to act out a lot of my my aspirations, if you will. I started taking piano lessons at a very young age. I think I was 4 years old, but we didn't have a piano. So my mother made me a cardboard keyboard, and you'd be surprised what that can do, not only for your imagination, but the ability to make forgiving mistakes, which you can't hear. So it was interesting. It was a very storied start to a life that eventually just got more and more exciting. Music became a semi-profession, if you will. While I was in high school, I got to go to Berklee College of Music during intersessions and play with the greats. Photography was always in the background. School became less interesting to me, and it was hard for me. I mean, back then, they probably would have classified me today. Back then, they didn't know what to do with me. But suffice to say that my mind was working. My imaginative mind and my technical minds were working. And when I got barely out of school, I started with much of the dossier that you just described. I started working at Price Waterhouse, and then everything from there just seemed to unfold too perfectly. But never was I comfortable in my own skin. I was very, very dissatisfied with the levels of feedback, meaning that, the more I made and the more I heard from people about how great I could be or I was, the less I felt of myself. And I know that sounds bizarre, but, I think this is, and having been in the entertainment business in particular, what you notice is that, insecurity manifests in a perception that you are less than what other people think you are or could be. And this is a vicious cycle. And I was kind of caught up in that. So after all this, in my later life, let's call it late adolescence, and then later adulthood, I started to get, depressed. I almost wanted to be self-destructive, not wanting to take my life because I don't think I really had the guts to do it. But I didn't want anything that I had, and I was very frustrated. I had a bucket list. At that point, you accomplish so much. That what is it that you need to do? And at such a young age, so I said to myself, well, I have never benchmarked 450 pounds. I never climbed Mount Everest. I never died and came back. Only know one person that did that.
Right.
And then the real thing was that I never found true happiness and peace. And so I was at this crossroads. I had a family. And I was at this crossroads, and I thought about quitting. I thought about this, just abandoning all of this. And then I realized that, that's not why I was put here. When you become hopeless, the only thing left is hope. And that's where I was. That was the crossroad that I was at. And I realized that there were two voices. And this is kind of the beginning of, the journey that I was then led on, which started around 2012. So it wasn't that long ago, about 4 years ago. And I realized there were these two voices that were in conflict with one another, the voice of the world and the voice of the heart. Now,
we talked a little bit about these voices prior. Let's break those down a little bit, Greg. I do have one question for you because I love what you just said. Is this can we attribute this quote to you when you become hopeless, all that's left is hope? Can we attribute that to you or no?
You can, and then you don't have to pay me any royalties because I want everyone in the world to hear that message, especially people who are in the unreached parts of the world that are in the corners of darkness. I want them to hear that message.
Okay, then I will start spreading it. All right, let's get into these voices. The voice of the world. How can we define that?
Right. So the voice of the world is a very powerful voice. It starts from, I believe, in the womb, and once you enter the world, it starts to become very loud, essentially through a loudspeaker. It's the voice that really tells us, it defines us, it informs us, and it motivates us. It's it starts with in the definition of who we are. Oscar Wilde said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken." But it seems like from childhood we're being coerced to be something or someone else. We start to adopt systems, political parties, clubs, groups that define our beliefs and who we are and what we think. It was like, when I listen to the Republican, I'm not political in that way. I don't choose parties or any particular polarized, I don't have any polarizing passions. But I will tell you that what's interesting is, and I think this is on both sides of the aisle, the Republicans were asked if a certain candidate was to become the nominee, would you support them? And they said, absolutely yes. In spite of all the differences of opinion, and quite dramatic, I might add, that they had with that individual. Why? Because they are a member of a party. And this is such a blatant illustration of what's wrong with the way we have defined ourselves. The second thing is how we're informed. Socrates said the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Now, Socrates started off knowing nothing, but he actually, as life went on, he, like many of the young innovators of philosophy and science, had to start from nothing. And they had to listen to something. They had to listen to their heart. They had to listen to their mind and their passions. But today, we don't do that anymore. We've outsourced all of our information systems to CNN and other 24/7 news cycles. And then to compound that problem, we have become beholden to a Snapchat culture where we don't even give ourselves enough time to digest the garbage that we're taking in. So that makes it even worse. And then one last end of the food chain is that we not only believe everything we're told, we believe that which is told from someone else who was told. And so this has created our quality of information. First of all, it has disarmed us from actually seeking the truth ourselves. And then the quality of the end result is terrible. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's another way that we can express what the voice of the world is, and some people say it's our preconceived notions from our mothers, fathers, preachers, and teachers. Is that what you're getting at when you say the voice of the world?
Exactly, and it gets capped off to how we're motivated by the world, and this is where we get into this cycle of madness, where everything from everyone that has meant something to us, whether we've known it or not, like our parents, our peers, our spouses, our business partners, our neighbors, our friends, forces us into this cycle where, bigger is better, much bigger is much better, too big is big, even better yet, more is not enough, much more is not enough, and too much more is only enough for now. And I think Dave Ramsey said it best. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And we end up into this cycle. And quite frankly, that's the wall that I ultimately hit, was that there is no terminal point and there's no rainbow at the end of that madness.
I couldn't agree more. So now the flip side, how about the voice of the heart?
Well, the best way to think of the voice of the heart, excuse me, is that the voice of the heart is a voice within. Imagine you're being raised in the jungle, and we've seen some movies that have tried to characterize this, and everything has to be learned from experiencing, by grabbing a piece of fruit from the garden or by learning about the behavior of other creatures that you're cohabitating with. And you are in love with your surroundings because you're connecting with your surroundings and you're learning about your surroundings and you're indigenous, and it's a very natural sort of process. Now, that's not something that many people want or can even imagine, because we are in the age of toilet seats that actually, do everything for you. And, everything has been fully automated in our lives. But the voice of the heart is about a very natural connection with all of creation. And it brings to us in our natural state an inner peace, a sense of generosity, a sense of purpose, and a deep appreciation and love for all of creation.
I can't help to think, just like with the voices of the world. Greg, I'm a chiropractor. When I think of voice of the heart, I think of universal intelligence or innate wisdom. Same thing?
Yes, I mean, there's been, I guess, I didn't discover this notion, but maybe what I'm doing is I'm putting it into a packaging that's maybe more easily delivered into a mass of people, and of course we'll talk about how that is getting delivered through Photographing God. But various philosophers, psychologists, we're all, it's a gravity, it's an inertia, Noah, that no matter how we purpose it or describe it or package it, it's still an inertia towards this natural existence. It's common, and it's a common denominator to all of humanity. It doesn't matter what country you live in, what faith you practice, what color you are, what race car you prefer, what baseball team you like. There's a natural resonance that we have as human beings that we have departed from, and we've become pulled more and more away from.
Yeah, that's why I think when you call it or say the voice of the heart, that's why I think it will resonate with so many people, because I think that just makes sense to me. It's analytical and less analytical at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And some of the things that I've articulated in terms of how do you listen to that voice of the heart, I've come up with about a dozen or so sort of dimensions of how that heart speaks to us, or how the world interferes with the heart speaking to us. And one is the seeking of success, which is what we're designed to do. What university are we going to go to? What great company are we going to work for? And how much money and what big house we're going to buy? But the reality is that we need to seek joy. And in seeking joy, success comes. Denzel Washington and others have said, I heard Denzel say this at a commencement speech, you never see a U-Haul attached to the back of a hearse. And if we would only think very much about what that image looks like, and where are we going with this? Another aspect which is very powerful is the truth. Unfortunately, because of the creativity of the English language and the ability to be ambiguous by design, which we call lawyering, has made it difficult for us to even communicate with our families at the dinner table. There was a great book, I think Mr. Osterwalder wrote it, if I'm not mistaken, called Blah, 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 about people who make a lot of money who could sit around a conference table and at a boardroom and in a boardroom and talk to each other and still never hear or understand what each other is talking about. And what I say is that too often our version of truth is really an untruth disguised as a perspective. So we're much more divisive than that. We use perspective to spin an untruth into a truth. And we hear this in politics, we hear it in medicine, we hear it in Hollywood. And this is pulling us away from a comfort level with what real wisdom and real truth is.
I'm looking at the next one down the line, and I see seek peace, and then anger and worry are just taxes on life. Now, I know when I get angry, it just ruins my entire day. So when you say seek peace, what do you mean by that?
Oh, it's again, if you imagine yourself alone in the jungle, you have nobody to yell at. There isn't much reason to get worried. There isn't much reason to be angry. And the notion that these emotions have they're part of our character, frankly, yes, but we have made them so central. And how did we do that? We made them central to how we communicate our emotions. So there was a great book called The Emotional IQ, and I think that's actually a series of books. I love that series. How we let our emotions drive our decisions. It shouldn't be that way. And the fact that we have allowed anger and worry which happen to be very popular characteristics that are utilized in television. I mean, if you go back even to the days of I Love Lucy, it was all about conflict. Now look at reality television. Reality television is teaching us that this is the way we need to live. But if we really think about anger and worry, they are taxes on our lives because there is no benefit. When you get angry at your family or at a colleague or at a partner, and that anger gets in the way of working out a solution, then there's no benefit to that anger. The same thing with worry. Worry doesn't give anybody anything. It doesn't have any return on investment. Worry will not control an outcome. So we need to learn how to manage our emotions and vis-a-vis our intellect. We should, when we confront a problem, confront it with peace. When we confront it with peace, then we have a better potential for a solution or a better outcome than if it's impaired by anger and worry.
How about slowing down? Does that fit into there?
Well, slowing down, and I'm as guilty of this, if not more so than anybody. It's very hard because, we've gone from a 20-channel cable universe to now hundreds of channels, and we have devices that can allow us to scan through and, different media. We don't take our time. We don't stop at yellow lights anymore. I mean, our whole life is on overdrive. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're missing everything around us. I have a saying, don't rush to catch the train in the morning and spend the rest of your day missing your life. And that's what we're all doing. I mean, all you have to do is stand in Grand Central Station, which I've done from time to time and taken pictures. And sometimes I can't believe how people are barreling to get into that train before the door closes. I believe that there's a pace for our life that is at a point that's so slow that we are actually in pain from it. And that's the pace we need to seek. It's a pace that gets us, and my wife is great at this because she gets me to slow down. And I know when she's telling me, Greg, slow down, I realize that it's like nails on a chalkboard for me. But I know that that's what I need to do. And you know how I know that, Noah? When I take pictures as a photographer, I am looking through that lens with tremendous patience. And that is how I am able to see. That is how I'm able to absorb the subject matter that I'm looking at. And I realize when I'm looking through a camera lens, how much I'm missing when I'm simply walking around with just my glasses on.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Now, after hearing your bio, some people would think that you've pursued the impossible and succeeded in the impossible. What do you have to say about that?
Well, much of that is probably true, but I always say that the impossible is that which is only possible by us, meaning that God has designed us for a purpose. And from anyone else's perspective, pursuing that purpose looks like something that we cannot do. I went to a show last night to see, it's the story of Gloria Estefan and Emilio, her husband. And the two, or rather, Gloria was at odds with her mother because her mother just thought she was wasting her time, trying to become someone famous with her music. Of course, the story has been told, and it's quite extraordinary what she did and what she's also survived. But the impossible, Noah, is that which God has planted in us that is only possible by us, and others think is not possible. And that's what we aspire. When we could, we abandon that sometimes because, again, we get on this fast track that is leading us into a down a pathway that is more predictable, more risk averse. But those of us who do seek the impossible, oftentimes will accomplish something of greatness. It's kind of like a child. It's funny when you're born and you're raised with nothing, you tend to become very creative. And it reminds me of what I had written a white paper once. It was about entrepreneurs, people who wanted to start businesses. And these were people who had great ideas and took measured risks. But then there were also, conversely, entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are just people with great ideas, but who have become very risk averse and don't think that it's possible for them to pursue their dream. And that to me is a disconnect from how we were created.
I agree. Now, when I heard you speak early March, I heard you say, "Find your version of crazy." What is that? My version of crazy is pretty crazy. What do you mean by that, Greg?
Well, I think when we don't, so I have a saying, go outside the box, but don't forget where you left the box.
Right.
So I think that I think, quite frankly, our society has become crazy. It's become mad, actually. And even if you look at the kind of sensationalism, take the Super Bowl advertisements. I mean, they're so bizarre, we cannot even necessarily decipher some of them. We don't even know what product is often being sold.
You mean like puppy monkey baby or whatever that horrendous article?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And millions spent on that. So people have gone crazy. But when I say find your version of crazy, I'm talking about, finding, leaving the box, using your creative mind, because I believe the mind is a terrible thing to waste. That is, by the way, not my quote. I remember it was on the TV when I was growing up.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, it was pounded into our minds. And it's true. I mean, our imagination is the ultimate virtual reality. I can't figure out why we're trying to create technology to replace our brains. But our version of crazy is being able to let our imaginations become robust. And a lot of people are scared of that. A lot of people can only do it if they can leave the box completely. And that is dangerous as well. So what I suggest is that you try to find exercises that allow you, for some people, it's just simply going out at night and being that person that they, weren't going to be. For another individual, it might be enjoying in a conversation that doesn't feel natural. So you're at a convention or at a conference and it's all doctors, perhaps, and you're the chiropractor. And you walk in there and you know already how doctors may feel about chiropractors, but you're going to go in there and you're going to be the most boisterous person. That would be viewed a little bit crazy. But think about what kind of justification, how important, how valuable it would be for someone to have that voice among that kind of group.
You're right. You're right. One of the last ones, receive life's challenges and problems with open arms.
Yeah. So this is one that's very passionate to me because I find it very hard today to come in contact either with family or friends or even casual acquaintances that we may meet just in our daily walk that aren't really suffering. It seems like everybody's suffering. And my wife and I take it very personally. We hear a story and it resonates with us deeply. And the one thing that we hope and we really try to encourage people is to understand that these clouds in your life are oftentimes a changing of seasons, or they are to get you to recognize the blessings that you do have. And it's so easy to forget that and to abandon that hope and that potential when all you can see is the darkness that's in front of you because of a particular circumstance. I mean, we've known people who have lost children, people who have lost their jobs, people whose marriages have failed. And we try to encourage them to find the hope and the opportunity because, without a valley, there can be no mountain.
Greg, it just so happens that today, while we're recording this, it's March 20th. 12 years ago today, my mother died. Oh. And I look back and I, as tough as it was, from that day on, that was the catalyst in my life to make a bigger difference and bigger impact in the world, for sure.
Yeah. You see, she's still alive within you. That's amazing.
Without a doubt. Like whenever I get an opportunity to tell my story and how she was the one that first brought me to the chiropractor and many people have heard that story, I honor her every time I tell that story.
Look at that. You're doing a tremendous justice for her in her name, but also in the people that you've reached out and touched with your tremendous practice and your acumen and your expertise. And so this is the way we look at these kinds of things, these challenges. And,
right.
if I could make it my full-time job, Noah, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to counsel people into finding greater hope in the worst of times.
Uh, I'd be right there with you, brother, for sure. How about you are blessed? This is great. You are blessed to be a blessing.
Right. Well, there you go. I mean, I can tell you, I mean, I have always had a generous heart. I would say that for the most part, for the better part of my life, it's always been in exchange for something else. You know, we give because we feel either obliged to or because we're trying to buy some kind of acceptance. That's the world again. But the point that I was able to disengage from those obligations and I was able to freely give, I realized that I couldn't give away enough. It reminds me of a story of a young lady I know that spent about 3 or 4 months in Africa. I'm sorry, in Mexico, in Mexico City, working in an orphanage, and there were these children who were the subject of tremendous abuse and hardship. But these children would go once a month into the village and donate their clothes, of which they had very few, to the children who had lesser than they. And somehow every month their clothes would get replenished. And you know, I realized that these kids we weren't there, and my friend wasn't there to be a blessing to them, but they were a blessing to her. And what does that say? That says that we're all blessed and we all have something to give. So I have a saying that when your elevator gets to the top, make sure you send it back down. There's no greater reward in life than lifting someone else's life or potential or spirits with what you have, and everybody has something to give.
Yes, everybody has something to share. There's no doubt about it. Now, that was a heck of a conversation, and I just keep going back to your bio. Now, for a guy who builds algorithms, how do you have such an awfully creative and philosophical approach to life? I mean, most people are familiar with left brain scientific, right brain artistic, but you have both cranking at the same time at an extremely high level. How the heck did that happen?
Well, again, I think, you know, as I mentioned a moment ago, I believe that a lot of it has to do with my upbringing. I think maybe, yes, I have some gifts, but I think everyone's born with a left and right brain capability. Unfortunately, when you're in more fortunate circumstances, one side tends to atrophy because possibly your parents find a strength in you that they tend to procure and start to nurture. When you come from nothing, you tend to have to use both your brains. It's like a child in the desert can't just imagine drinking water. He has to go out and get it. And, so the creative side and the imagination side has to be bolstered, has to be supported by a practical side, a scientific thinking. And I think that's why most innovators actually come from less than privileged lives. So I'd say that was a major contributor to me having to I couldn't just be imaginative. I also had to be very, scientific and practical in order to try to exercise my vision.
I think that's an incredibly crucial point, and I think you hit it on the head. I have nothing more to add on that front without it. Just fantastic. Now let's get to the nitty gritty. We spent a half hour really talking about some fantastic stuff, some mindset, people that just take home that people can really alter their lives with. Tell us a little bit or a lot of it about photographing God.
Well, photographing God is, I believe, I don't think it's the payoff to my life experience, but I will tell you that it is at another level for me. Having again had the experiences and the background I had and thought I had done everything, I realized I had done nothing until photographing God was born. And I think you'll come to understand why as I describe it. So, starting in 2012, my family and I were very intent on trying to make an impact around the globe. So we started volunteering our lives, our services to parts of the world like Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Particularly, I was leading much of this charge because what I was doing is I was working with nascent entrepreneurs in various, in much needed communities to help them start their own businesses. Because as you can imagine, there's a lot of big players in these parts of the world that are kind of extraction industries and extraction businesses that are going in there and using the labor and then taking the economy out of those countries. Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to help people start their own entrepreneurial revolution. And so we started going out frequently. And mind you, I had my camera in tow, taking pictures as often as I could. And my wife and I were flying back in the summer of 2014, I believe it was August, flying back from the Middle East. And I said to her, and it was such a notion that if I could have stopped the plane in midair, I would have, just so I could get the thought out. And I said to her, honey, I don't feel like I'm taking pictures of subjects anymore. I feel like I'm photographing creation. I feel like I'm photographing God. I feel like I'm photographing the beauty of all of creation, even in the most desolate parts of the world, the most destitute parts of the world. And she said, well, that's brilliant. Why don't we, kind of trademark that, photographing God? So when we got back, I got the URL, photographingGOD.com, and all the various social pages, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, and didn't do anything with it. Just kind of let it sit there. And then all of a sudden, September 5th, actually a bit over a year later, September 5th, it was Saturday morning. I woke up kind of like in a cold sweat, and I said, I have to do something with this thing. So I took this picture that I had taken called the Tree of Light, which it's hard sometimes when I see this picture for me not to just break down and weep, because it is, to me, the epitome of all that we are and all that we could be. It's nature at its purest. If there is a Garden of Eden, and I believe there was, this would be the garden. And that's what that picture, I took the picture, I put it up on the blog, and I put it on Facebook, and then I also wrote a blog called The Snapchat Culture, The Lost Art of Seeing and Feeling. Now, I didn't even know how to spell blog, so this wasn't something I did. So I struggled through it. I wrote, it's about 2 pages or so, and it was about how we have gotten down to, we've gone from pictures on the wall to photos in the slide tray, to photos in the album, to the shoebox, then into the hard drive, and now into the cloud. And then they're overpopulating with selfishies, or otherwise called selfies. And we're just taking pictures like mad. Everyone's got a phone. And then at the same time, the way we communicate is like back in the Stone Age with hieroglyphics, emojis. We send symbols to each other. And I realized that we are desensitizing ourselves to the world. We are separating ourselves from creation. So this thing just poured out of me, Noah. I mean, it just was very natural. And I wrote this blog, and I put the 2 pieces of content up on the site. About 3 days passed, and I asked my daughter, she was 18 at the time, I said, Kristen, what do you think? We've got 5,000 Facebook followers. She's like, no, that's pretty good. I have 6,000 though. Oh, okay. I didn't even know she had 6,000 friends. I know she only talks to 2 of them. So 12 weeks later, Noah, I don't know quite how it all happened, but we were at over 300,000 Facebook followers. Jeez. And over 30 million impressions, and about 5 million people at the website, and about 90 to 100 countries, every faith you could imagine, commenting and worshiping the photography and the imagery. And we started to embellish on the content. I started putting up more pictures, and now I started creating what I called, these composites, which I call WOWs, wall of wisdom photos, which are pictures that are combined with a quote, or what I often call a quoterpretation, which is an interpretation of a quote, and an inspiration that personalizes it. Featured stories, poetry, prose, started to include other photographers from around the world. And this thing has just grown out of control.
Can you explain its success?
Yeah, well, at the moment wasn't able to. It was phenomenal because when I first started photographing God, even in my own mind, I thought, oh, maybe it's a great place to sell a picture. Maybe we'll put posters up there or something. Maybe 5 people will buy something in a year. So I didn't have any idea until after this thing started to evolve, and then it resonated with me. And all of the pieces of my own life started to fall into place. When I say that, I mean, I found my purpose. I found out why I had been given certain opportunities to see certain things, to experience certain things, to learn certain things about this world and about this life and about what I was capable of. And so what I realized, first of all, is that photographing God was not about religion. Religion is a very personal journey. But the world wants to put God in the religion box. And God is not about religion. Okay? So I think the first thing that resonated was that it was about creation and God, the creator of all things, and the enormity of what God has done. None of this is happenstance. I mean, the world is absolutely amazing. And I will tell you, every day that I know somebody that touches photographing God, they grow closer and closer and more intimate with creation. I think another thing very important is that photos, think about this, photos freeze moments in time that are otherwise lost to our subconscious. I mean, you know, the very second that we see something miraculous, it disappears to us. But a photograph can freeze that. And I ask people, what miracle did you miss today? I know you missed at least 100 of them. And a photo is able to freeze that. And, you know, I looked at some research. Actually, I looked at quite a bit of research. There was a study recently that found a couple of key points. One is that as far as social media goes, visuals, color visuals in particular, increase a person's desire and willingness to read a piece of content by 80%. When people hear information, they only remember 10% of that information 3 days later. However, if there's an image attached to the information, they retain 65% of that information. Mm. Another thing is that content with relevant images get 94% more views than content without images. Now, in our own research, Noah, we have found that, first of all, an image is generally like an Instagram or any image-driven apps, which many of them are today. A person spends an average of 5 seconds, often less than 3 seconds, on a particular image. In photographing God, our time is 30 to 45 seconds on an image. People are spending more time in images. Why? Because, first of all, they're coming there for a reason. Secondly, the inspirations and the quotes are causing people to take a deeper look into the images. And the last thing is we're training people, believe it or not, we're training them to spend more time in an image. Hence, they spend more time seeing the world outside of the platform.
That's incredibly well said. I didn't know how you were going to answer that. I don't even know if you could answer that, and you absolutely nailed it. Now, here's another super great question. What's next for photographing God?
Yes, well, my partner, who happens to be a chiropractor, I think he's a chiropractor's chiropractor, as many of them call him, Dr. Pat Gentempo.
Yeah, great man.
Yeah. Well, we've known each other nearly 40 years. And it's interesting that we should come together on this project. Just by coincidence, my initials are GP and his are PG, and photographing God is PG. So anyone out there with P and G in their names should come on board. So,
Can I change my initials? No, I'm kidding.
Well, you have a great name anyway.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yes, but Pat and I called Pat, say about 8, 9, 10 weeks into this thing. It seems like a lifetime, but about 8, 9, 10 weeks into this thing, I called Pat and asked him to join me on this journey because first of all, his name just came to me out of nowhere to call him. It was quite extraordinary. But I also felt that Pat's abilities, his business sense, his ability to really capture a concept like this is quite extraordinary. And I thought we've always been complementary in many ways. So I said, I've always wanted to do something with this guy. Now's the time to do it. So I brought Pat on board. And when we did that, we started to simply just, kind of get a stride for this thing, get a feel for what photographing God wanted to be to the world before we decided what we wanted photographing God to be. And so we let it, kind of generate its own holistic audience gathering. And then we had a wonderful organization. I think one of the best developers out there, Myriad, software which came on board and offered their services to create an app, which we have developed the wireframe, and we'll be developing the full-blown deployable application soon. And we got to a point that we said, okay, we've proven a lot of things. We've proven things statistically. We've modeled out various aspects of this business, and we know that not only we don't have to go get an audience for this thing, the audience is out there yearning for it. And so we had to decide where, what the next phase would be, and that would be to raise money, to do some bridge financing, to start to lean model various aspects of the framework. One of them is to continue to build out our audience. So we're desiring to get to a real deployment of the app to 5 to 10 million people when we launch it. The other is to obviously finish the app, to get the app into a version 1 or a V1 state. And by the way, the app is very exciting. We believe that it will replace the way people interact with their imagery today, whether it be their iPhone or their Android gallery, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. Because what it's going to do is it's going to create significance in not only acquiring imagery, but also sharing imagery in a much more different and deeper way. There's 7 main features to interaction that are built into the app. And I like to call it the antisocial social media app, because social media today is all about me, 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 me. And Photographing God, or the PGOD app, is about essentially giving credibility, giving reverence, giving love to all of creation, and then sharing that love in a community of people with obviously the same belief about all that we are and all that we can be. So that's a different way of interacting as a community, as a global community. And it crosses all the boundaries, like we said, culturally, racially, ethnically, spiritually, and it should be adopted by all. And then there's some secret sauce that we have. We have a feature called Genesis, which is in design, that will make everyone a decent photographer. I'm not going to give away what that is just yet.
Okay.
Yeah. In addition, last 2 things is that we're working on 2 books. One is called the 365 Days of Wow, or Wall of Wisdom, which will be essentially it could be a daily a reminder of the kinds of things that we talked about today, about how we can start to become more in tune with the voice of the heart by looking at these photos and the various inspirations. And the other book is Listening to the Voice Within, Abandoning the Voice of the World. And what we want to do with that is we want to create kits for different age groups. So we want a youth group, an adolescent group, an adult, and a mature group that can, or a kid, if you will, that can work with people in trying to engage each other on how to be more deliberate in appreciating life, appreciating appreciating imagery, appreciating each other. So we believe there's exercises that we can put together in that form. And the last thing is PGOD Technologies, which is it's kind of a ancillary entity that is creating embedded technologies that place control of advertising in the hands of consumers, and it's obscure. The reason we want to do that is we don't believe that Photographing God or a lot of other technologies should be impaired by advertisements. We think that takes away from the image experience. So we want to create technologies that embed deeply, still allowing these platforms to be self-sustainable and monetized, but not be in your face with advertising.
I can't help to think that with so much quote-unquote religious unrest in the world, Photographing God has just come at the right time.
Yes, it has. And again, if you go on Photographing God, which you can go on the Facebook page at Photographing God or www.photographinggod.com, you will see the traffic. You will see the comments come from people all over the world: Iraq, Pakistan, Beverly Hills, Anguilla, you name it. It's people all coming together. And oftentimes it's just simply saying amen, or with love, or some kind of acknowledgement of whatever the image or the inspiration is putting forth. It is quite extraordinary. Today we had a post, and it actually, within the first hour, it had 1,700 likes from 80 countries. And the post said this: how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb? kind of based off the old joke.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote is this, and it's a picture of a light bulb in a restaurant. The quote is this: "It takes only one filled with the love of God. We have been given a limitless ability to light up a room or the world even and love one another. And love is best expressed when we overcome the voice of the world and what the world teaches us for the voice of the heart, which is true and pure. It only takes one bulb to light up an entire room."
Greg, I'm sitting here overwhelmed, nearly in tears. I hope this podcast has done photographing God justice.
Well, I believe it will, and not by anything that I'm capable of, my friend. And I believe that there's a great force behind this. And like you said, Noah, it couldn't be at a better time. Our hope now is really found in the fact that we are so hopeless, and we need something like photographing God.
I agree. Are there any last words beyond what you just said? Because I thought that was quite perfect.
I think that's about the best I can do today. But I do want to thank you and your audience for the time they've taken to listen to this, and for you to share your platform with us. I thank you enormously.
Thank you, Greg. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you are listening to Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. If you like what you've heard today, and I can't imagine you didn't, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. You can sign up for our incredible weekly email at www.centerforepigeneticexpression.com, and please let me encourage you to check out our first project/summit at www.painreliefproject.com. Our next project is almost complete, and early registration is ready at www.antiagingproject.com. Lastly, help us help you by leaving us a review on iTunes. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.